You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another live episode of Flipping the Birds. I'm Brian Cameron alongside Morgan Burkett, Zach Chavalella, and we're coming off a very big win. But first and foremost, how is everybody feeling on this beautiful Saturday morning?
Good, man. I wish I had a big breakfast like you have, but
I actually dropped half my breakfast during the intro. I'm a little livid right now.
Damn, it was bigger?
My last.
I'm doing all right too, man. I'm happy to be here, talking some birds. I'm on to greener grasses, bluer skies, and just having a good time in Philly right now. This
Go ahead, just do it. Let it out.
I'll tell you this. This rookie in Philadelphia that we've been watching play lately, he's starting games. He's looking dominant. He's looking like he's going to be a fixture of this Philadelphia team for years going forward. But enough about Jared McCain. Let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, just the way that this team and their own rookie Keon Mitchell have been playing, man, they got me excited. I'm ready to talk birds.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
Usually Zach's rants are a little longer than that. So
I'll be honest. That one I had previously rehearsed, so we had that one cut down and trimmed, nice and ready for the good people.
Well, nice and ready for good people means you're waking up Saturday morning. The Eagles are first in the NFC East. They're second in the NFC. They're 8-2, and they just took down the national. How can I say this? What's another word for front runners?
Cinderella team. That's what I would call it.
There we go. They took down the national Cinderella team of the Washington Commanders. Jaden Daniels, we said it on Tuesday. He was going to get exposed because the pressure that Vic Fangio was going to bring. Morgan alluded to it, where Vic Fangio could bring so many different looks that it was going to confuse him. It looked like it did the job. That last touchdown, I'm not going to count because it was a garbage time touchdown. But overall, and we can start with offense or defense, however you guys want to go about it. What impressed you the most out of this Eagles win?
I mean, I think what impressed me the most is we were like 100% on our points on Tuesday, man. I mean, we talked about it in general is, they were going to switch up the coverages on the back end, confuse Jaden Daniels. And on the flip side, we were worried about the backside of the backfield. And, you saw Austin Eckler, get his, and then tight ends as well. So I think overall what impressed me the most is that the Eagles kind of hung in there. You see in the past, right, where stuff like honestly, and we'll talk about it more, but, a pretty bad game from certain position groups, especially to start. And they overcame that. And, Saquon's just inevitable, man. Like that dude, it doesn't matter how many times you can hand the ball for a couple yards. He's going to break one eventually. So, just, again, overcoming, getting in their own way. But they're doing it again. They did it on a big stage, which we've seen them before, struggle to finish. And they're definitely finishing games. And the finish is legit. That finish will win you playoff games.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of you can point at individual performances and that are fantastic. Guys like Saquon, like you mentioned. You can point at group performances, like the totality of the defense, I think overall, that resilience that you mentioned. If I'm singling out players who I in particular I felt so great watching during that game, it's the team's two defensive stars. And I don't even mean like Zach Bond, who is working his way into that conversation, but I'm talking about Jalen Carter and I'm talking about Keon Mitchell. The two guys who absolutely just blew up Washington at every turn. I mean, if you're talking about a guy like Javon Carter, like did not take a snap off, like, which is crazy, like for a defensive tackle, like playing every single snap. Jalen Carter, playing every single snap like is insane for a defensive tackle. And then you got Keon Mitchell, didn't allow a single target to scary Terry McLaurin. Not so scary anymore, man. Like, that's insane for a rookie to scare off. And I know he's scaring off a rookie quarterback and throwing his way. Like, that is a factor, I think. But you're scaring off the prime target, like, as a rookie cornerback in this league. Like, that is absolutely insane to be able to do that, just to establish your game so well. And that's not just his performance in this game, that's the reputation that he's built factoring into that as well. And I mean, man, like, these building blocks, man, these already defensive stars in Keon Mitchell and Jalen Carter, like, man, it's exciting in Philadelphia. You know, they had, I would call that among their best games this season for both of them. Just the way that they were able to frustrate Washington at every turn. And, you know, it bodes really well for the Eagles' future.
And kind of just staying on the note of Quinion Mitchell, right? And you mentioned that this is the reputation he's building. Like, the numbers he's put up this season, I mean, we said Terry McLaurin, right? 0 catches. CeeDee Lamb, 1 catch, 5 yards. Jamar Chase, 2 catches, 19 yards. Malik Neighbors, 1 catch, 9 yards. Amari Cooper, 1 catch, 10 yards. Mike Evans, 2 catches, 19 yards. Chris Olave had the most. There was only 2 catches for 23 yards. Drake London, 1 catch for 5 yards. I mean, it's weird to say that we actually have that stud corner that we wanted for so long. We have the shutdown corner that we've wanted for so long. And for him to not only be here, but for him to fall down all the way to 22 in the draft, it's kind of like you're questioning, like, what did the rest of the NFL not see in him that Philly did see in him?
I can't answer that for you, man. I feel like we all knew he was going to be a stud, man. There's just things he shows on tape. I think, like, the number one thing that's kind of pushed him to succeed is just the attitude, man. Like, you see it on film, and I think with just him learning the NFL speed of things and the playbook and all that stuff, you know, he's still leaving, not even leaving plays out there, but we've seen on tape him be able to make plays and make turnovers, and some of those PBUs could have been interceptions and stuff like that, and, like, he's still developing. That's the scary part, is, like, you know he's going to work hard. He's been a hard worker. I came in and had to win a battle even to play that position, won that battle handily, right? Like, there's just, like, all the boxes along the way he's been ticking, and still there's things he can improve on, and still there's things that, you know, we're going to see down the road that I don't see how there's not a progression where, you know, it is Philly, so a lot of the national media is not going to consider him because, you know, it's Philly and they hate. But, like, I see him being the best corner in the NFL pretty quickly. Like, you know, you turn a couple of those PBUs into interceptions. He would probably have 3 or 4 at this point, and then he's locked down. Like, it would be like a negative QBR when targeting him. So, the zone coverage stuff, he's still got to work on too. Like, he's much better in man. Still got to work on communication. But again, you have new players and young players all over this secondary, so that communication is only going to get better. You have him and DeGene now for a couple of years together. It's going to be lights out.
You know what's really funny about Kenyon is that the more and more, you know, we see him play, and the less and less opposing teams are willing to throw his way because they know the kind of guy that he is, the less and less acclaim he's going to get through places like PFF, right? You know, because he's going to turn into almost that kind of, like, offensive lineman type where, like, if you don't hear his name, that's a good thing. If he's getting the opportunity to break up passes, you're going to see that showcase talent. But if they're too afraid to even throw to him, like, he's not going to be among, like, the top graded PFF corners. You know, he's not going to have, you know, those specific type. You know, he's not going to lead in PBUs. He's not going to lead in interceptions, obviously. Like, that's something that's been an issue for him this year, but he's not even going to get the opportunity to do anything like that. But that's all because he's such a pure shutdown corner, which as a rookie is just immensely insane that he is at this level already, to the point where, like, teams are legitimately afraid to throw in his direction. Like, imagine that you're going up against Darius Slay and a rookie, and you're afraid to throw to the rookie. Like, that's crazy. And that's not a knock on Slay. Like, that's just crazy about Q. Like, that's insane.
And going back to, go ahead.
I just want to add, like, he's able to do some things that are just freaky athletically too. Like, I think because he makes them look so smooth, Like you see him in coverage against Terry McLaurin, like Terry McLaurin gets him turned like 3 or 4 times, which like, you know, in on paper in DB talk, like that's not good. That's not what you want. And he just like Quinnon's just getting turned. His feet don't slow. He's completely fluid. He just turns back. Like he doesn't look like a rookie out there. He looks like a 12-year vet sometimes. Like stuff like that. It's like, hey man, like that's a comprehension of what the offense wants to do and what routes you're gonna get. So he can allow you to turn. He knows you're gonna come back, right? Like it's stuff like that. You're just like, man, the sky's the limit for this kid because he's getting away with some stuff that like rookies make that mistake. It's a touchdown a lot of times. And he's able to do that and just still be in phase, like be right there with him. It's incredible, man.
He's definitely been remarkable. I mean, according to PFF, he has a 25% forced incompletion rate, which is first among NFC cornerbacks. I don't know where it ranks amongst the NFL, but it's a sight for sore eyes. Like we did not expect the defense to be the strength of this team, and by far, like they're the identity. In my opinion, they are the identity of this team. Like when you think about the Eagles, you know, you think about the offense, you're like, okay, Jalen hasn't hit his stride yet. Saquon's carrying them. We're not seeing much of Jahan, like things of that sort, right? When you think about defense, it's like, shoot, they got Zach Bond for nothing. This guy's balling out. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, like these guys are nasty. Jalen Carter's over there still. And it's like, it's just remarkable what a good defensive coordinator can do with talent. Like, you know, they started off a little rough because Fangio was kind of, you know, making it where they were playing his scheme. Now it's more so like he customized his scheme to the strength of every single player on that defense. And I do agree, Quinyon does have to get better with zone coverage. He did, you know, leave, in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, he did leave a lot of room at times between him and the offensive player. But yeah, I mean, from top to bottom, I was actually very impressed with the pass rush. I think Josh Sweat, and nobody's talking about it, he had a standout game. I think he had the most pressures on the team as well. But him, Jalen Carter, everybody just coming into their own. And it's even Bryce Huff and Nolan Smith. Like these guys were out there showing out. Bryce Huff had this freaking hammer for a cast on him, and he was still swinging it around. Defense was pretty damn impressive.
Swinging that hammer.
The defense was impressive. And I'm going to ask this question, a very bold question. Is this the best defense in the NFL?
It's a great question. I think that, you know, I haven't watched enough defenses across the league to know like who you compare it to. But, I mean, in terms of talent and in terms of ability, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a better defense. And, again, you talk about some of those players, they still haven't reached their potential. Like, talk about Bryce Huff, for example. You know, he was brought in as a pass rusher. You know, we're not necessarily seeing, you know, what we thought we were going to see. The development as a run stopper has been fantastic, though. I think Bryce Huff, from season start to now, has improved immensely against the run. And that's huge, right? You get a guy that you bring in that's supposed to be a specialized pass rusher, you know, and it's going to take time. I think that we kind of forget how young he is as a player. And, you know, with the Jets, it wasn't like he was, you know, a full-time, all-the-time starter, right? The whole time he was there, right? Like, he's still got some development to do. You know, you're still in that interior defensive line, still waiting on some of these guys to really, you know, separate themselves. And honestly, like, I think from your front seven, this was one of their worst games of the season. And you still had a great performance overall, right? Like, you know, Zach Bond a couple times, which we almost never see him make mistakes. Wasn't great in man coverage. CeeDee Lamb all of a sudden was pretty good in man coverage, which is fantastic. You know, being said, he's covering Zach Ertz, and you know, speed is definitely what he struggles against more than you know, route running. I think he's pretty decent, but you have all these pieces, right? And like you even talking about Quinyon, I don't think they've reached their ceiling yet, and that's a scary premise. So I think. You know, without question, this defense is in consideration for the best defense in the league. And if they start actually, you know, pushing the envelope, then it could be, you know, we could be talking about one of the better defenses historically, I think. I mean, already, right, there have been some stats that come out, and I know some pretty niche stats don't necessarily tell the whole picture, but some statistics out there where it's pretty incredible what they're doing.
Yeah, one of those statistics that you know, I would say that you're talking about, yards per attempt. The Eagles lead the NFL 6.1, the fewest given up per attempt, which Like, you think about the secondary makes sense, but you think about this defense coming into the year, I think that was a big concern for a lot of people. And, the one thing that I do want to preface with this defense is, they have had difficult challenges. Yes, they've had Joe Burrow, they've had Jaden Daniels, they have had some easier tasks as well. They've had Trevor Lawrence, they've had Cooper Rush, but yeah, I'm trying my hardest not to say Ben DiNucci because of the whole tush push thing that's been going on lately. It's been working its way back into the common tongue. But you look at some of these matchups, and it's been obviously you have oh my gosh, not Eli Manning, who's the Daniel Jones. Jeez, they're this other stupid white quarterback in New York right now. Your guy. But so Daniel Jones, like guys like that, like guys who are like difficult to to envision that success kind of against. But even still, like, it's incredible. Like, you watch this team go up against, like, the Titans have an extremely talented secondary, and it's one of the few compliments you can pay them this season. But to be beating them, to be beating a team like the Denver Broncos, who I would put Denver, I think Denver is one of the few teams that you can say like is above this Eagles team at this point. But really, the biggest reason I give that is because they've had tougher opponents. When you look at Philadelphia, if they can continue this defensive level of play that they've had this season through Baltimore, through some of the rest of the challenges throughout the rest of the season, yes, I think that you can argue that this is possibly the top defense in the league. I have them between 3 and 5 right now. I do like Denver a lot. I think that their pass rush is definitely a lot better than Philadelphia's. I think the Chargers have a pretty solid defense this year as well. One that is really exciting. And then you look at a team like Minnesota, like they have the sexy defensive stats. I don't think that they're quite as tactically sound as Philadelphia, which is, kind of odd to say. But all that's just to say, like, this, we went from praying that this was going to be a league average defense to now we're talking about like a top 3 defense in the league. And that's, I mean, credit to Vic Fangio for that, but credit to these players for getting up to speed, buying into the system, and just handling business on the field.
That's a very fair assessment, right? And I know we don't like using PFF that much, right? When it doesn't favor what we're trying to say, it just doesn't work, right? But in this case, it's favoring what I'm about to say. I think that you're absolutely right. I think they're definitely a top 3 defense. PFF has them as an overall defense, the highest graded defense in the NFL at 87.2. The next team, the Detroit Lions, is at 83.6. Their pass rush is actually second in the NFL behind the Pittsburgh Steelers, which I find remarkable because in Philadelphia,
I think that's where we get into maybe PFF is 100% of the time.
I mean, that game probably helped them a lot, right?
Yeah.
But the coverage grade that they have is also the best in the NFL as well. Like, it's just, again, I take it with a grain of salt. It is PFF, but they do get paid millions of dollars over there to do whatever the hell they do. It's just, again, like you mentioned, like, they may not be the sexiest team, and they may not have the sexiest stats. We don't have a pass rusher like, that could stand out on this team, honestly, besides Jalen Carter, who's still developing. We don't have that Hassan Reddick on our team. We don't have that Aiden Hutchinson or Zadarius Smith, whoever they added on. We don't have that. But I think the main factor as to why I truly believe this is the best defense in the NFL is because this defense, for the first time I've seen in a long time, they play together and they actually work together. Like, everything's just in unison. Like, when one person falters, the next person is right there to pick them up. Saquon misses a tackle, and Nakobe Dean's right behind him. Cooper DeJean's right behind him. Jalen Carter pushes the QB out of the pocket. Joshua is right there to catch him. Like, it's just, this is a defense that I feel like I haven't seen in a long time, this kind of structure. And it's just like, yes, they've beaten up on bad teams, but we're talking about the Giants that put up they almost beat the Commanders. And the Commanders were considered a top-ranked defense. And that's the same Eagles team held the Giants and Commanders to barely anything.
Yeah, I think that's the I don't want to say it's the Zach Bond effect, but I think you have enough balance between young guys that are bought in, and that comes from just the structure, right? Having an experienced defensive coordinator, but they also brought in the right veterans, I think, which has been a struggle for the Eagles, right? You bring in these veterans that you're hoping to get, certain performances from, and whether or not you get those performances, the leadership aspect hasn't always been there. And this year, you point to every kind of position group. You have Brandon Graham still on the defensive line. You're starting to get those Georgia guys to buy in. Again, Jordan Davis would be the kind of final piece to that puzzle. I don't know if you use keys in puzzles. You could. But so you get the buy-in from the defensive line. I think that's where we'd like to see probably the most improvement. I think we can probably all kind of agree on that. As the pass rush would be the big factor where, they can start to figure that out. The Eagles would really be locked down. Linebacking crew, right? You have Zach Bond. Man, you talk about buying. Like, you can just see the buy-in on the field from that guy, right? Like, flying in tackles, always wants to be involved, is everywhere on the field. Whatever his assignment is, like, he's got to cover Austin Eckler in man coverage. It's not great. That's probably not what you want, but that's what the defense asks him to do, right? That's what Vic Fangio's asking him to do, and he's doing it. And then in the back end, I think, again, as questionable as CeeDee Lamb has been, or not CeeDee Lamb, goddamn, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson has been in man coverage, right? I think he, gets that buy-in. Him and Darius Slay, right? You get that buy-in, from the secondary. So at all three levels, you have these leaders in place, and I think that it just makes a world of difference in terms of what you're talking about, Brian, where you have, three levels of football all doing their job and doing it well.
And can we say the underneath stuff barely exists against them? Like, things that we used to struggle with, like, when Nathan Gary was out there, or some plug-in linebacker, like the checkdowns are just like, they're limited. And it's just, again, like, for me, it's eye-popping just because every season for the last like 4 or 5 years, when you go into a game, I mean, you expect a QB to light up this defense, and that has not been the case. So yeah, that's pretty much on the defense. Let's go straight offense, and then we'll talk Saquon, right? I don't know about you guys, and I hate to be this guy, and I'm not blaming Nick Sirianni, so I'm just gonna put that out there because I know Zach's eyes are already focused. The offense is something's not clicking, and I don't know if it could be a heavy Jalen Hurts thing where he's not making the reads quick enough, or he doesn't trust the reads quick enough. But the whole holding the ball so long is putting the offensive line in a position of a failure, in my opinion. And they're getting bailed out week after week by Saquon Barkley. I know that the stats from Jalen Hurts are not terrible, but the eye test is saying something's not working on his end, like where he's not trusting the routes. He did look a little concussed in that first half. Did have a little bit more zip to the ball coming into the second half. But there's something not working on that end of the ball, which, granted, is great that Saquon's carrying the load, but you can't expect Saquon to do everything every single week if you want to get deep into the playoffs. Do you guys feel like there's a great level of concern with the offense that nobody's speaking about? And then we could actually even go to Jay Fizz's question after this.
Offensively, I mean, if you're kind of putting in terms of last game, I think you got, again, probably one of the worst performances from that offensive line for a majority of the game. And I think, on both sides of the ball, talking about, that front that's who gets affected most by these short weeks, right? So, it's not an excuse, but I do think that definitely played a factor. And, it's always going to be harder on those big boys, right? Having to play in that short amount of time. So it makes sense. But yeah, not a great performance from your front. And I think that, for all of the things that Jalen does well, he really is affected mentally in terms of his timing when he doesn't feel comfortable in the pocket. We talk about how strong he is mentally and, all that stuff. He's unwavering. Like, it shows physically that he does not trust that offensive line sometimes. And he brings his eyes down and he tries to escape when he doesn't have to. You talk about that time, like Lane Johnson, like that's a lockdown right tackle. And there's sometimes that Jalen is just going into the sack. It's like, man, you have a pocket there. You don't need to escape. You got to trust your guys, and that's limited. That's lacking. I think some of it though is just like you have to force him to make the check down, and you saw that like that on that pass to Saquon. I'm pretty sure that's just a design check down play because you're just not hitting it. It's like sometimes you just got to hit it, man. You have probably right now the best offensive weapon in football. Like, just give him the ball. It doesn't matter if you want to wait for somebody to, like, this is one of those times where if you have a deep dig and you have a check down to Saquon and the deep dig's like, you know, a 60% throw and Saquon's 100% throw, you throw it to Saquon every time. Like, I understand you want to force the ball down the field. I understand it helps with the run game. I understand it opens things up underneath. All that is great. Just give it to Saquon, right? And this is one of those times where he's overthinking it. I don't know if there's something in his head that's just, you know, the timing's off or whatever it is. I think, you know, if you're the offensive coordinator, you know, Kellen Moore's just got to give him some time where hey, listen, this is a check down play. We haven't seen as many screens recently. We haven't seen the ball coming out early. The couple times they have been doing that, it's that ISO quick out to A.J. Brown. Dallas figured that out pretty quickly, right? And then, you know, the Washington right now, you saw how they covered it, right? They just knew it was coming. They jumped it. And then now all of a sudden you don't have that outlet anymore. So they got to figure out different ways to get the ball out early and consistently. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. Like, where are the slants? Like, A.J. Brown eats on slant routes. We haven't seen any. You know, there's a couple of adjustments that are easy to make, and they just haven't been making them.
Yeah, I think when it comes to those adjustments, listen, there were some play calling miscues during this game. Like, the double flea flicker, like, that was a nightmare. Like, that was just, I don't know who was playing backyard football and decided that was a good idea against this Washington defense. I think a lot of it rides on Jalen. And I don't mean that to, you know, say things that you hear from time to time, like you can't win with Jalen or this or that. I actually think that it's encouraging that the issue is Jalen's, because I think it's going to be easier and I think he's shown this, it's easier for Jalen to course correct than at times it is for Sirianni to course correct, right? So when you're in a situation and you have Jalen who is, and the verbiage is tricky, right? Because it's not that he's, you know, not kind of like bought into the system, but he's just kind of unsure. You know, he's kind of unsure on the field. He's kind of lacking that Jalen Hurts confidence that when it's up, he looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the entire league. And when it's down, he's holding on to the ball. You know, he's putting the ball in danger, which admittedly he did not do in this game, which is very important to note. You know, that's the kind of stuff that you see in Jalen when he's not feeling that vibe of confidence. And who knows why he wasn't quite there, you know, that past Thursday. I kind of feel like the table was kind of set up for him to feel pretty confident. You know, it's just I think part of what would help is exactly like Morgan said, and, you know, kind of working some of those slant routes over the middle. And it's tough because they went to Jahan Dotson early, and it set up a good vibe to start the game, but then also false confidence, I feel like, in the receiving core outside of, you know, guys like A.J. Brown, right? So obviously they went to Dotson again later in the game, you know, and he had a pretty key drop when A.J. Brown was also open right in that general vicinity on that same play. So it's I don't want to say like you have to worry about Jalen like no longer favoring AJ. Like, that's not true at all. Like, you think about Jalen and AJ, their relationship and how good of a player AJ is. He's going to work the ball back to AJ, right? But what they need to figure out is just how to maintain that rhythm that this offense at its best can see, and how to maintain that confidence in Jalen Hurts that allows him to be the best version of himself. And, you know, again, I think that starts with how you script the game to begin. You know, I think that's why it's important to kind of lean on Saquon early. So even if you did, you know, obviously like rushing on first down to Saquon Barkley is like, I'm almost always going to want to do that just to kind of set the tone. But, you know, if you want to, you know, work on your first three and it's, you know, rush to Saquon, perhaps second rush to Saquon, slant to AJ, something like that, just to get the ball out quick, get it, you know, so that way you're making progress Just get the feel of progression under Jalen Hurts that you are making progress on that offense, because it was another week of no scoring in the first quarter, which is like, I think that narrative's tired. Like, I don't think we have to like relitigate that whole thing about like they're in major trouble, but you do want to face off those former ghosts, and you do want to put that issue to rest. So you have to make sure that you're doing the things that work consistently. Not just this week and maybe not this week, or this week and maybe not that week. Like, you have to do it every week, right? You have to make sure that these are core competencies of your offense, of your team. So, that's one thing that I think that you can give some criticism to Nick Sirianni. You can certainly give some criticism to Jalen Hurts. At the end of the day, it's up to Sirianni to put Hurts in a position to succeed. And while Hurts has to make those plays on the field, you got to get your quarterback in that rhythm.
Yeah,
I
think.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to add to that, because I think some of the game planning, like we saw in the last game, how successful the runs to the outside were, right? They weren't having much success in the middle. And we're talking about those routes. We're talking about the slants. I mean, Washington ran a ton of all hooks, right? A captain's concept, right? And we don't see that in the Eagles offense. What it does is it widens the linebackers, right? Like, they have to get out to that. That's usually the linebackers. So, unless you're playing man coverage, which again, like, you're playing man coverage, you just switch to all verts and have Jalen Hurts run for a first down. We see that all the time, right? But like, we're not expanding the linebackers at all. Like, you want Saquon to carry this team. Well, they're just going to put 7 or 8 in the box and crash down in the middle, just pinch, and then have the linebackers flow to it. You need to get the linebackers going out, and then that's when those lanes open up. And that's like, I don't know, that's pretty basic offensive coordinator stuff. And so, like, those are the kind of things that make me a little nervous with Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni. It's like those basic things we talked about, not having hots in the offense last year. Like, these are basic concepts that are built in. Man, like, every Madden player who's ever played Madden understands you gotta kind of go and you gotta switch it up and have those concepts in there. They just don't. It's confusing.
It's weird, right? Because, like, again, I think I'm past the Nick Sirianni blame game, right? But my thing as well, like, you still see an imprint of what Nick Sirianni brought to the table, to the team, which you should, right? He's the head coach. This is what he wants to run, this and a third, right? But my thing as well is, like, the long routes are just not working for Jalen, right? In the beginning of the game, there's no reason why Jalen should be going on a 5-step drop back and then waiting for AJ to get down the field and then throw a deep pass. Like, it shouldn't be a thing. Like Zach said, like, first down, you run with Saquon, right? My go-to after that, you get a slant, you get a curl route. Like, you do those kind of things to develop the confidence of your quarterback. That way, later on in the game, teams are expecting these short intermediate passes, and you can take advantage. God bless you. You can take advantage of a long pass. And it just seems like they're ass backwards. And like you said, it's basic stuff, right? If this is basic stuff, why are we not doing basic stuff with a freaking awesome offense? Like, it's not like we don't have talented guys. We have Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, who are great when with the yards after the catch. Dallas Goedert, great with the yards after the catch. May not always be available and healthy, but he's great with the yards after the catch. Even Saquon, great with the yards after the catch. I even give kudos to Kenny Gainwell. He's been damn good with yards after catch as well. Like, it seems like we're doing on offense, we're doing the opposite of what Fangio did with the defense. We're not tailoring this offense to the advantage, to the strength of our players, as opposed to the defense, where they're tailoring the defense to the strength of their players. Like, yeah, Saquon, he's a great running back, but we see the advantage that you see with the outside runs. You see the advantage that, when you get him in open space, what he does. AJ Brown, he's a damn great wide receiver. He could catch any freaking ball, but he's great with the ball in his hands. Get a slant route. Devontae Smith, same notion, right? Can catch the ball at any point in any level of the field, but he's great with the ball in his hands. Like, we're not doing the basic stuff, and I think that's, I don't want to say concerning. I feel like that's a bad word, but it's intriguing enough where it's kind of like, shit, like, this could technically bite you in the ass in the long run. Like, you could actually be out coached by not doing the simple things.
Yeah, I think like it all boils down to the fact that what's been hurting the Eagles most is just stacking positive plays, right? Like, we talked about what this offense does, and it's kind of segueing into the question about red zone offense and stuff like that. But like, the Eagles have the X factor, right? Like, they can make those long plays. It's the lack of consistent positive plays that are killing them. And eventually that's going to start affecting your defense too. Like you're playing teams where the defense has been able to get themselves off the field, but sometimes you need those long drives. And, granted, the Eagles have been able to put those long drives together, but a lot of times the games they're winning is just because a player makes a play, right? And as good as, this team is and as good as and talented as those guys are, it's not a sustainable way to win games consistently. And I think that they just need to find that rhythm of, hey, listen, like, let's just get 4 first downs in a row. Again, they've sustained drives, but usually
small goals, baby steps.
Yeah, exactly. Like usually the times they're sustaining drives, we're still seeing like 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, and like that's great because they've been winning those, right? And then you start to see a game where Jacksonville figures out how to kind of stop that push, and now there's panic, right? It's like this offense can't be predicated on hoping to get 3rd and short. Like sometimes you just need like 5 yards, 5 yards, 5 yards, 5 yards, right? And just move down the field. We haven't seen too many of those drives. It's like 1st and 10, then 1st and 10, then 2nd and 5, then 1st and 10. It's always like, let's get it to 3rd down and hope we can win short yardage. And they have been, right? And, again, you need that in the playoffs, but that can't be the only way you're winning games.
That's fair. So that's a heavy dose of what we've seen in the offense, right? I'm gonna take a little break just to let Zach do his thing with this question that Marshawn Lynch, and I always say Marshawn for some reason. Marshawn Lynch asked about the six.
What do you mean for some reason? It's a football podcast. You know why you say Marshawn. All right. So listen. All right. Martian, my guy. They're 2-10. It's not pretty.
Damn.
Right? What is pretty is the way that Jared McCain is playing. What is pretty is Duke basketball in the NBA. And what's not terrible is the Sixers seeding. I get it. They're last in the East. Even still, East is pretty rough. Number 4 seed is still just a 500 team. Only 5 games back of the 3rd seed, right? There's time. Things can be worked out. Joel Embiid needs to play better. Like, that's just it. Like, outside of back-to-backs, playing every single game, got to play harder, got to play the full game. Kind of gave up in the second half of last night's game. Not even denying that, right? Listen, man, it's tough. Like, I talked to Joel about this. I'm gonna be quick because this is an Eagles podcast. And when Joel talked to us about his knee for the first time that they made him public, which was shocking. I still remember seeing him walk out, and we were all like, "What the?" They gave us food that day, and we were like, "Something's happening." That was the sign. It's like they're doing something at practice today. And what it turned out, they brought us Joel, they brought us Paul George, and then of course they brought us Nick after him. Listening to Joel describe his recovery process, the big takeaway was that he's not confident in that knee. Right? There's almost like a phantom injury, if that makes sense. So the body part isn't hurt the same as it was. Like, it's not in the same condition, because with a knee like that, like, you're continually doing damage to that cartilage, and it's not going to come back the same. And especially when you're having surgeries like that, where you're having bits and pieces of it removed, right? But the bigger issue is that he's got that. It's almost like he's seeing ghosts in his knee, right? We talk about a quarterback, and they're seeing ghosts out there, like they're seeing extra defenders. It's kind of like that with his knee, where he's so worried about that knee caving in again that it affects his entire play on the rest of the court. And it's something that he just, frankly, and we'll talk about this more, on perhaps a Sixers podcast that may or may not be returning to Philly Sports Network, or always, you can talk to me on Twitter about it or Blue Sky. He's got to get over it. Like, that's it. And that's not me. That's not me being cold. That's the fact of life. And if the problem is that Joel can't be Joel until he's over it, then Joel has to take a step back. And I don't mean don't play. I just mean focus on defense, focus on rebounding, and let guys like Tyrese, when he comes back, Jared and Paul George, let them cook, let them eat, and you just set the table for now. But that's all I got on Joel for right now.
Sorry to hear that.
You weren't even listening to a damn word I said.
The ghost in knees.
It's
Joel,
just like,
back.
you hit me with, I ain't reading all that, but I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
Listen, I mean, I've given up on basketball a long time ago, right? Because I don't like this LeBron era of basketball.
Yeah, I mean,
but
also being a New York fan, it's
he's been in the league for
I'm not a
like
Knicks fan.
20.
What the hell?
He's been in the league for like 20 years, Brian. You can't be like, I haven't watched basketball recently because of LeBron.
I really haven't though. Like the last time I was really invested in basketball, Kobe was in like that point where he's about to retire kind of thing. I just haven't been a fan of this new era of basketball per se. But it does suck to this is not a Sixers spot, but it does suck to know that the star player of a city like Philadelphia, right? Like a guy that's as dominant as a Joel Embiid has to take a bit of a back seat because of an injury that not only could get worse, but it's it's lingering in his head for so long. Like that stuff is tough to deal with.
Yeah, well, I want to clarify one thing. So the injury itself, like it is not gonna get worse. Like that's one important thing to say. Like
it's at the boiling point.
Well, no. What I'm saying is like
breaking news.
So the knee, the knee, as you have more injuries, will get weaker over time. Like that is true. But the specific injury that he had, that torn meniscus, that is not getting worse. That's already been removed. He's gone through the time and the training to work the knee back into health. He's lost the weight to help with it. You're not going to see that injury come back. You may see another case of that injury, but that specific injury he's not going to re-injure. The bigger problem is that when you talk, and this is true across all sports, it's really just true in life. If you do damage to certain parts of the body, but especially your knees like that cartilage is not coming back. You're not getting donors to replace it. Like if you're a professional athlete, that's not going to work. Like you can get like knee replacements and stuff like that, but you're not an NBA player, getting like you're not going to get somebody's who died in a car accident. Like you're not getting their meniscus, like and getting that installed, and then you're going to be fine and good to go. Like that's just not how this stuff works, right? So what you do is that you have to play through the pain. You have limited burst, limited motion. When you have less and less cartilage in that area. And it does affect you moving forward. I don't think that how badly Joel Embiid's playing now is how bad he's going to play throughout the season. He's played 2 games. Like he's going to come back. He'll be okay. But like he may not.
He just won't be as very like that 2-year string of him just dominating that we saw. Like it won't be to that above that.
He's
level.
not going to be like that today. Like honestly, he could get back. That if he plays 30 games this season, he might be like that by the 30th game. Like to me, the tougher thing is he's lost so much weight. He doesn't have that strength to dominate anymore. He needs to change his entire approach to the game. He told Tim Bontemps of ESPN that he's kind of going into his Tim Duncan phase. Tim Duncan also adjusted his game. Tim Duncan didn't just lose weight. Like that's where this is being lost. Like Tim Duncan changed his whole game. Mm-hmm. And that's what Joel has to do. Joel has to realize the situation that he's in. He has to buy into what it actually takes to change. And he has to be willing to defer in the situation, right? So it's again, I feel bad taking up so much Sixers time on an Eagles podcast, but like this is what Joel has to do in an effort to win, right? He can't try and go out there and be Joel Embiid because he's sick and tired of hearing people talk about his name and this and that. Like, fuck it. Like, forget pride, forget hubris. We're all gonna die someday, and we're gonna be dead. To quote the great Mike Tyson, like you cannot be worried about pride over winning. That's never going to. It's just never gonna lead to a successful NBA team. Like that's just not how it is anymore. So Joel has to not necessarily defer, but he's got to be willing to let other guys take the reins. And vocally, he's saying all the right things. He's called Maxey the franchise for years now. Let Maxey be the franchise. Let Jared McCain take over the scoring load. Let Paul George take over the scoring load. Like that's the kind of stuff that he has to allow instead of forcing up 10+ weak-ass shots every game. And no, Marcus Hayes, I'm gonna censor myself. Martian, no. I'm just gonna say that. You're on mute, Brian.
Back to the Eagles as we wrap up the podcast and stay away from Martian Lynch for the rest of the chat. I want to make a case really quick. It hasn't happened since 2012. But why can't Saquon Barkley be the MVP this year? Like, I get Lamar's doing Lamar things, but Lamar's doing Lamar things with a guy like Derrick Henry. Saquon Barkley is doing things that they expected him to do in New
Yeah, be
York.
careful here, Brian. Be careful how you proceed.
He's
doing it
doing
with Jalen
things.
Hurts? Is that what you're saying?
No. He's doing things that they expected him to do in New York, and he's also, like, in my opinion, he's protecting an offense that's still trying to find their ways. Like Jalen, we know when Jalen's on, Jalen's freaking on. Like, to me, no matter what, like, he's a top 5 quarterback. As many people want to write him off and put CJ Stroud and Jaden Daniels in there, Jalen Hurts to me is at least he's a top 5, top 3 quarterback in the NFL, and he has that DNA to win games for the Eagles. He's done it in the past, but right now he doesn't have his footing behind him. He doesn't have that confidence or that consistency. So Saquon Barkley is not only carrying the load, but he's carrying the load in a way where it's like, this guy is special. Like, this kid is like phenomenal in everything he does for this offense. Why not Saquon Barkley for MVP? It's been 12 years since we've seen a running back win an MVP award. It shouldn't be just a quarterback award. It should truly be an award that goes to the most valuable player. I get Lamar is doing his thing, but Saquon is technically doing it by himself.
I don't disagree, but I just think it's too much of a quarterback award.
That sucks.
It does suck. But, like, realistically, like, I think the difference right now is that, like, it's last year's MVP award is because Lamar won last year's MVP award on the stats that he did, which weren't really great stats, but no one really had that great of a year. And now he's doing better than he did last year. So it's like, how could it not be his award again? But I think that has more to do with how poor, not poor. He still had a great season, but, like, comparatively, right? Like, it wasn't a fantastic year for a lot of guys. Right. And so you gave it to him last year. Like, you'd be hard pressed to find a reason why you can't give it to him again this year. And I think that's really what's hurting him. I think Saquon's having, a fantastic career. It might come down to that Baltimore game. You never know. I've never seen it come down to a game where it's not a quarterback versus a quarterback for the MVP award. So that's an interesting, predicament to be in. But it might come down to that game. Who knows? But I just think that the understanding of how important a quarterback is to winning games kind of screws that narrative for Saquon. But, man, yeah, I mean, he should win Offensive Player of the Year, if nothing else.
But what he's doing, like, it's also like reviving an entire position as well. Like, before the season, the idea was don't pay.
But
big
look
money.
at McCaffrey, right? Look at McCaffrey. The season McCaffrey had, he didn't win. That's the issue. You're not wrong. I agree with you. I think it should be Saquon's, but.
Yeah, Morgan, you're 1,000% right, especially drawing that parallel to Christian McCaffrey. Like, let's just look at last year, right? Like, I think McCaffrey's last year and Barkley's this year are very comparable when you look at, like, situations like total yardage. Like, McCaffrey obviously is a little bit more involved as a receiver. Saquon's going to eclipse his rushing total, McCaffrey, from last year. But when you look at, like, total yardage, I expect them to end similarly, but I think that Barkley can come out on top in that area. But if you're talking about him getting around 2,000 total yards, him getting, I would say he's at 10 touchdowns on the season.
He's on pace for 1,900 plus yards right now.
Yeah, no, well, that's what I'm saying. Like,
rushing yards, not total yards.
No, I understand. But what I'm saying is, like, we have to see how he plays the rest of these games. Like, that just because he's on pace for that, he has to actually do that, right? So it's the concept is fine, but we have to see the actual play. Like, he could be even more successful in the upcoming games than he's been earlier this season. And he could increase those averages. Like, that's possible too. Just we have to see it, right? So, at the moment, like, he's trending in that direction. And that's why I think that I would call him the lead candidate for NFC Offensive Player of the Year. Yeah, as, Morgan alluded to, like, that's more so where I see that kind of factoring in. But
is that award
not only is
that award still split? I'm sorry to interrupt. Just a quick question. Is that award still split?
AP, I think it is, isn't it? Isn't the AP award still split?
I thought the Offensive Player of the Year was just all together. Or am I reading that wrong?
Yeah, I think you can get just Offensive Player of the Year, but then I think it's split for the AP. Like the like, how there's like the NFL awards and there's the
AP awards.
The press award, yeah. I don't know. Who knows anymore?
Well, in any case, he is after Lamar Jackson the most electric offensive player in the league this year. So he will not win MVP, but he will be recognized for those efforts.
Yeah, I think he's got to win Offensive Player of the Year. I think what might actually hurt him, and it kind of sucks, is the touchdowns, man. Like, you add realistically what? Like, how many touchdowns did Jalen Hurts?
Dude, at least five. Like five is
Yeah,
like
Jalen owes him a couple
deserved.
touchdowns, man. Like that touchdown, that play on Thursday night where he got to the 1 yard line because of his knee. They should have given it to Saquon. Come on, man.
Do you mean that just handing Saquon the ball after the tush push is not the same thing as giving him the touchdown? Is that what you're trying to say? Do you remember that from a few weeks ago when Jalen Hurts, Saquon got it to the 1 yard line, Jalen rushes it in, and then he made sure that Saquon knew that he was the one who got them there by handing him the ball?
It's not the same. When it comes
it's
to
not
money,
the same,
it's not the
dude.
same.
Like it's not like
there's incentive. They get incentive.
it was a cute moment, but like
levels.
it's not the same, dude. Like you gotta give it up to Saquon and get the rock actually.
Okay, he's got eight rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 receiving, so he's at 10 total.
2 receivers, 10 touchdowns. So you add 5 to that. You're talking about a season that he might have 30 touchdowns by the end of the season, right? Like that's a different conversation than 20.
No, for sure. No, I think that in a world without the tush push, like you are legitimately talking about him in that 25 to, possibly, at 30 might be extreme, but 25 to 30 range, like I think is possible with the way that he's playing. And the one other thing I'll say about Saquon is like, I don't want to use this to take it away from him because I feel like, if you look at his whole career and he's playing behind that terrible Giants line for so many years and terrible quarterback play from the Giants for so many years, he's got a very good offensive line now. And it's not to say that the offensive line is what's allowing Saquon to do this. It's more so that he is getting a boost from the line, right? The line's not standing in his way. The Eagles have shown that they made Miles Sanders look like a Pro Bowler.
But in only 10 games, he's already eclipsing what Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift did in the last 2 seasons.
No, I understand it, man. I'm just saying, like,
he's like that booster that you get in the eye.
Like, he's obviously in that separate class, right? But the thing is, like, I think that there will be people who are like, oh, well, it's the Eagles O-line. So it's like the rise stands to figure. Like, people will almost hold that against. Like, you look at a guy like Lamar, right? And you look at his receiving core, and there's some decent names there. Like, Zay Flowers is a good player, and Deontay Johnson, even though they don't like to throw to him. Like, Mark Andrews is, in theory, except for like the first half of the season, is a good player. And Derrick Henry, obviously in the running game, like that's some good balance there, but his receiving core is not like, compare that to AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. Like it's not as good, right? I know we're not comparing Lamar and Jalen, but I'm just saying all this to say, like, you'll look at that situation in Baltimore, and the line's fine in Baltimore, but it's not as good as Philly's. He's working with a lesser offensive line. He's working with lesser receiving talent. Like, you can point to Lamar and say, a lot of what he's doing on his back. And it's like Saquon, you can definitely say that to a degree, but it's like you have this player who was already very good, and now he's great because he's behind this line. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be some guy. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's going to be the argument by some people.
But I feel like you can say that with Lamar as well. Like, Lamar, like we know he's MVP. I would never take anything from him because he's nasty, right? But he's extra nasty this season because he has a guy like Derrick Henry that can just hand the ball, and then Derrick Henry will take it like 40 yards and put him in the red zone. Like, and I know it's not up to us, right? I know, there's a bunch of jerk offs up there that make these decisions. But it's just like, if we're not looking at advertisement BS, we're not looking at the money stuff, like, you can make a statement where it's like, if it comes down to the wire, like Saquon versus Lamar, like if Saquon breaks a record, for example, like he crosses 2,000 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns. Like, how do you not say no to that?
Can I end this? Go ahead.
I mean, how do you not say yes to that? Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think he has to win the rushing title. That would be the first. Like, if he doesn't win the rushing title as a running back, it's hard to, like, it's hard for you to say that something historic that doesn't usually happens if he's not number one in his own category. And that's not his fault. I think he's like legitimately more valuable to the Eagles offense than Derrick Henry is to the Ravens. But like, you have to win the rushing title. Now he's got a game in hand, so that's easy to be done, but you have to win the rushing title as a running back to even be in consideration for MVP.
So Zach Bond has to take out Derrick Henry in that game and look at him. Okay.
Facts.
What do you guys have?
69% completion percentage, 24 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Like,
that's my creative player.
We got to keep the main thing, man. We're talking about Lamar Jackson this season, and he's been incredible, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, you look at this guy, like, this isn't like, 2-time MVP Lamar Jackson. I get it. He's good. Like, no, he's not just good, but he's having an incredible season by his own standards, right? Like, this is like first MVP Lamar Jackson level of play. And that was an incredible player. But honestly, even better. Like, the QBR is not quite there, but you just look at some of the ways that he's functioning as a passer, not only out of the pocket but on the run, but just as he is, as a facilitator of the game. Like, I feel like he's taken steps forward this year, and he should have over his second year in the league. But like, over that first initial fantastic MVP season, you're looking at a better player this season, I feel like, in Lamar Jackson.
So what you're saying is Saquon Barkley has to throw 2 or 3 touchdowns, have a completion percentage of 100%, and he wins MVP.
I think if Saquon has the season he has this year, last year, we're having a different conversation.
I agree.
Like, Lamar's been incredible.
You look at Lamar. Lamar's already met his touchdown total from last year.
Yeah, and he won last year. So
he won last year, and he was exactly like you're saying. He was a weaker candidate then. So it's like, if Saquon is having the season last year, I agree. I think that's a much more valid conversation. But
it's
Baltimore
like Trump
still has.
It's like Trump, like he won the first time. He won the first time, and realistically, having a stronger campaign this time around. So he's probably going to win again. Look what happened. Man. Lamar Jackson is the Trump of the NFL. Can we go that far? Is that what we're talking about right
Morgan now? Throwing lobs, throwing in grenades safely from Canada.
I don't have to deal with the consequences. I'm up here.
Oh, man.
On that note,
that might be the first time someone compared Lamar Jackson to Donald Trump. That might be a
hey,
first.
Man, that's what we're all about here. Flipping the script here, flipping the birds.
It's a season of firsts for Lamar Jackson. What can I say?
Yeah, man. Record breaking up.
Yeah.
Come on, Brian. Bring us home, man. Bring us home.
Right,
what's going on, man?
Dan, you got to bring us home. Like, you're the only one who can do it. Like, we literally can't. I mean, we could if we would, but
we broke it down for everybody. I know there were several questions out there in the chat. I do believe we are running out of time. But first and foremost, we did discuss, hey, the Eagles are possibly top 3 defense in the NFL. Saquon Barkley, if he throws three touchdowns and 100% completion percentage, he'll win MVP. And the offensive struggles, right? We alluded to the fact that Jalen, there has to be a common ground that they find with Jalen where he gets these, the quick reads going. But other than that, the Eagles are 8-2. The Eagles are division leaders. They did beat the Washington Commanders. They are currently 3-0 in the division, which is phenomenal. They do go on the road for Sunday night next week. They'll be facing the LA Rams, which is another test. And after that, we'll finally get our matchup between the Ravens and Eagles, which should be a hell of a game as well. We appreciate you all for joining us, for commenting in the chat. We greatly appreciate you guys and your support. If you're still on YouTube, make sure to give us a thumbs up, comment, whatever the case may be. And we'll see you guys on Tuesday.
Go Birds.
Yes, sir. Flip.